So in Better Call Saul Season 4, Episode 8, we open with Jimmy getting on a bus to Louisiana and he's saying goodbye to Kim. And the montage with Jimmy on the bus, we can quickly figure out why Kim went to that supply store at the end of the last episode, and that these are clearly cards Jimmy is filling out on Huell's behalf to make it look like the people from his hometown support him and feel like he's being wronged. So then we see Jimmy filling these cards out, and he's doing it with different handwriting, the different ways he's writing it, and then he's actually divvying up the work and giving off the postcards to fellow bus passengers to help him out and paying them for it. But this montage to me took way too long. It clocked in at about 5 minutes long, and I think it felt really long here too, because this has still been a really slow burn of a show, which is all good, but we're on episode 8 now in the season, and things should pick up a little more at this point, and this feels like something you would see in an episode 3 or 4 of a season. I almost feel like this show sometimes is getting too comfortable, and right now it really feels that way. But it was interesting to see Jimmy in a non-desert landscape with trees around him in Louisiana and the green grass. But it's interesting because in the hanging shot that ends the montage is of the post office, and we see Jimmy go in there with all the cards, and you wonder if that man sitting with the dog is going to remember that, or the post office worker, because he's still doing this in front of people, so it could be setting up eyewitnesses. But overall, this was my least favorite open of this season, especially because this season's been so good with the opens, all setting up for the theme of the episode, where this was just kind of dragging out a reveal from last week's cliffhanger. So like I've been doing in my past reviews, I'm going to keep with the Kim and Jimmy storyline first, then I'll get to Nacho, and then I'll get to Gus and Mike. So then we see Kim's blasting her headphones working on this Huell case. And in this scene, Jimmy seems happy about it to her that she's working so hard on this, but when he turns around and looks back at her, I think Bob Odenkirk portrays perfectly that he's feeling obviously a little guilty about this because he knows she's such a hard worker and he's kind of taking advantage of that, and she's putting her job on the line doing this, and he knows that. So in the next scene, we see Jimmy's at the nail salon, and the owner, that is great, is suspicious that his wife is mad at him and pours him liquor. And the way Jimmy reacts to this, he says, "I think we're past that," referring to Kim. So it made me feel like Jimmy was on the same page I was this whole time, that Kim was distancing herself from him, the way she closed the door on him the last episode in the office, and that sorry wasn't even going to be enough. But he's not realizing this is actually getting Kim's juices flowing and attracts her even more to Jimmy. So I was fooled by the end of this episode, as was Jimmy. She's getting pulled in by that thrilling life again that Jimmy leads, just like she did in the episode where he showed her the side of Slip and Jimmy, and they were a great team together. So we see Kim brings her crew of employees with her to the district attorney, and she's using all her studs on such a small case. So it's super hysterical in a way. And it shocks the district attorney, Erickson. And she's like, "Kim, what are you doing? This is such a small case, using expensive employees you have for this." But that's Kim for you. She sees the bigger and the little thrown away stuff, cases that people look down upon and don't give any effort to. So she's really clearly justice for all. So we need more Kims in the world. And she sees her best employees, her hardest work is worth it for Huell, giving this innocent man justice, and for herself to feel like she's helping someone have purpose, and for Jimmy to help Jimmy. And what I loved is a great scene we had right after where we get the reveal that all these cards that Jimmy was filling out were sent to the judge on the case that we saw in an earlier episode, who we originally saw as a nonchalant guy, and now he's completely overwhelmed. And Kim's actually getting a little extra jab out of this, because he has a great line where he's like, "What is this, Miracle on 34th Street?" And him saying that line is so important because it's actually Kim proving against the point he made to discourage her, where he's like, those great cases only happen in the movies. And now he's actually referring to this case as a movie. She's making this kind of purpose a reality and showing that to him, even though he doesn't know she's orchestrating it. So it's like an underhanded payback on Kim's part. And she lies to this judge's face about not being the one who pushed this. So she's playing the game now. She's doing something Jimmy would do. And she's breaking through her constraints in her head. So now the district attorney, Erickson, freaks out at this and wants to make calls to people who wrote in about Huell and records of the arresting officer. This is all stuff she lightly paid attention to in the beginning because she wasn't taking this case seriously. So here we see Kim's plan is already starting to light a fire in this district attorney. But I can't help but feel how risky this whole operation is by Kim and Jimmy because of how many other people are involved and know about it in different ways, with the people filling out the cards, the actors we're going to see Jimmy with. It's a very dangerous situation, but it's crazy to see how much Kim is willing to risk this all. Now, when this district attorney makes these calls, I started freaking out because I was like, oh my god, they're all going to get caught by this. How did they not think of that? But Jimmy, being the brilliant guy he is, has all those burner phones there. And we see his notorious film crew come back, which was good to see. And they're doing different voices of people she's calling. And Bob Odenkirk crushes it here with his impersonation of a pastor. It lets him do what he does best, showing that comedic side. However, this operation as a whole felt a little absurd. With how many phones they went through, how many cards they got signed, sent out, that were all genuine. It kind of felt like something you'd see at the end of a kid's movie. Like the big plan that everything just falls right into place. Especially that donations counter and the whole website they had going and everything to time right perfectly. I really wasn't totally buying this whole situation. Making this the most unrealistic episode of Saul yet to date. Having that feeling like this is kind of silly. And what upsets me about that is this is a universe that's notorious for not making things feel silly and unbelievable and staying in a realistic tone consistently. And this felt leaning towards the other way, which was a first for me. So wasn't too happy about that. However, great acting by Odenkirk like usual in this scene. And the key line Jimmy says here is to the district attorney that as a pastor, he's going to bring charter buses. And you realize here fully the main goal that Kim set out to do was make a threat to this judge and district attorney that this is going to start a circus. And this would cause them to fold over. It's putting pressure on them. Big cases can handle that and it's worth it to the system to deal with that kind of stuff. But a little case, they're just going to throw it away and end the outrage. They don't want anything to do with that. Hence the judge's reaction when he gets those letters. However, this whole Kim and Jimmy storyline this episode feels hollow in a way and boring and just so straightforward. And it's poorly written for this show's standards. So when Kim gets the good news from district attorney that she's folding, and Jimmy asks her in the hallway how'd it go, it shocked me she kissed Jimmy. As he was shocked. She's swooning over him now again. And then the next morning we see her loving his Louisiana impression in bed. And I'm actually happy to see them happy again together. It just felt really fast to flip to this. I mean, last episode we opened the montage of them fading to black and them separating. So I felt like that hurt this feeling realistic too, was how we quickly just built up a distance they were building, and then in one episode Kim head over heels again. Maybe this could have taken another episode, this storyline, to make that more believable in that transition. It just didn't feel smooth. And Jimmy that morning says to Kim, it was all you, and we know she likes hearing that now. She's playing ball. But when she gets up, Jimmy's still laying in bed there, and he's thinking about her because there's that guilt still there where he knows this only leads to bad for her, this world of crooked lawyer that happens. If he wants to keep Kim around and let her work with him in this kind of way, that ignorance is bliss mindset's going to really have to kick in if he wants to actually protect Kim and not feel guilty about it. So we see Kim has a meeting with Mesa Verde and actually disappoints the big boss here, not taking on a new challenge where a boss would want you to say, yes, I can do that. Basically, she's just saying it's not doable. And we see Kim doesn't want to do this stressful stuff with no feeling of fulfillment. There's no thrill, it's boring. And this goes back to that classic Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul overarching theme of just being bored and not having fulfillment in life. That is why I think these shows connect with humans so much, because that's a common problem and a huge part of the human condition we don't address enough, is finding that purpose. Looking at this, Kim is already cutting aside her big gigs like Mesa Verde and getting involved in this Jimmy game. And we got to see Jimmy was actually starting to look at smaller offices, and I took that as he was starting to give up on Kim and doing this Wexler and McGill. Seeing in the last episode how he realized he couldn't do for Kim what she had in her office at Schwagart and Coakley. So when he's looking at the smaller office, she comes there smoking a cigarette, wearing a pink top instead of a blue top, which is so not like him. And she's a bad girl again. This is the one that was doing the slipping Jimmy at the restaurant. And she wants to do more, she tells Jimmy. For a second I thought she was going to pull back again, so that shocked me again, as it did Jimmy. And the crazy thing about this is Jimmy admitting to her he could have screwed her over doing this and that it won't happen again in an operation like this, but she still wants it. She's getting this thrill now that he always gets. And what was cool about her smoking that cigarette was it's like she's getting hooked now into this life, this bad habit, like she is the cigarettes again. So nice touch there. Now jumping to Nacho's storyline, which I actually thought was great in this episode. This was a highlight of the episode, which I usually don't think. So Nacho's in Salamanca's restaurant, but now he's actually on the back table doing the boss's job, overseeing the transactions. The guy comes in short. Nacho rips his damn earring right out of his ear. That was crazy. And he's telling the guy in front of him, next time you take care of that if you knew that guy was wronging you. Why did I have to do it? So Nacho's showing this tough side and boss side now. And it seems like instead of Nacho running from this life, all of a sudden he's embracing it and becoming the man he hated. And then we see Nacho back at his place, and we see those girls there. And it actually gives me Jesse Pinkman vibes in that living room they were in with the big TV, cartoons on, crack pipe there, a bong. I feel like we're seeing Jesse soon. It has to be coming. But the interesting thing here is Nacho puts the money he made from the day in a safe, and we see what falls out of the safe is these Canadian IDs he has for him and his father. So there's a side of him that was planning to start a new life and run away with his father and go to Canada, which would be perfect. But he's actually hesitating on this in that moment when he's looking at those two IDs. And he's getting hooked to being this drug lord he has an opportunity to be, in a sense. So this is old Nacho coming back to his old roots that always tempts him. Crazy, crazy stuff. But what does Nacho come back to the next day at the restaurant? A new Salamanca's there, Eduardo, aka Lalo. Now, it's a deep reference, but Lalo's referenced by Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad Season 2. When Saul Goodman is kidnapped by Walter White and Jesse Pinkman and taken to the desert, and Saul assumes that it's Lalo who has abducted him and starts begging for his life, and he gets a sigh of relief when he realizes it's not him and it's Jesse and Walt. But what's so crushing about Nacho seeing this is he realizes there's always more family here in this drug world, and they always get past the reins. And Nacho's standing there, he knows he got rid of one Salamanca just for another one to come right back in. I have a feeling he will be Nacho's end for sure, and Nacho will go too far now. It's like, come on Nacho, just run away with your dad at this point. Haven't you learned your lesson? But this was a strong Nacho episode. I'm usually not that interested in his story, but this was great. This gives me hope for where it's going, and it kind of sets Nacho to be more in a crazy mode now where he really knows he's screwing his dad over, his own life up, but he's hooked to wanting to be this drug lord, so it makes it more interesting. Now with Mike's storyline, which I've given a lot of annoyance to, I thought was actually great this episode as well. It's the first time Nacho and Mike's storyline are the highlights of the episode to me. So we see Mike brings the German workers to a strip joint, and he takes Verner down to a dive bar. And he bonds with Verner here, and Verner talking about his father and opening up to Mike a bit, and Mike opening up like a hair, basically saying his dad left him. But he's growing more on Mike, and Mike likes him. But there's a red flag here. Verner says he has a wife who he's loved dearly for 26 years, and he's never been this long away from home. This has to be concerning to Mike. How much pillow talk could Verner be doing with his chick if he's openly talking to people out in the bar? And it's never good to have someone with baggage. I feel like Verner's the one who's going to be the one to cross Mike into utter darkness, from Mike liking him to eventually having to take care of him, it being really hard to do. But Verner's just too soft and aloof. And then Kai, the rabble-rouser, is causing more trouble, of course, gets kicked out of the strip club. And Mike getting in his face was great. And he's like, go on, try me. And after seeing Mike stand his ground and intimidate Kai, we see that good spot Mike always has where he actually is concerned about the stripper and leaves her money and makes sure she's okay. He's just another good man, Mike, who ends up doing terrible things. Another overarching theme in this universe. And then drunk Verner tells strangers at the bar the scheme for this lab. Is he out of his mind? That is the worst thing to do in a Gus operation. And it was really great when Mike comes in and tells him that his wife called. Was a shot quickly got in, Mike grabbing that sketch. He notices it right away and puts it in his pocket. So nice touch by the director of this episode. What's smart about this whole situation they're building now is Kai's actually the red herring here. We're all clamoring and waiting for Mike to take care of Kai and beat him to a pulp or get rid of him. But Verner now is actually the most concerning to Mike, even though he doesn't want it to be that way. The one he actually likes, which makes it much harder. Where someone like Kai is easy to get rid of. You don't care about that guy. But Mike confronts Verner right away, showing him how serious this is. A great line Mike says here is, they forgot the German national in the middle of Albuquerque talking about pouring concrete into a secret location. Great line there. This happened to be my favorite scene of the episode. Him telling an innocent, goofy guy like Verner how serious Gus is, how much money he's making, and what happens when things go wrong. And he goes, do you understand what I'm saying to you? But does Verner get what Mike is really saying when he's like, do you understand what happens to people who mess this up? It's like Verner's too innocent, aloof, and optimistic to understand this means you get killed. You don't just get to leave. So Mike and Gus meet up. Mike gives Gus an update on the operation and calms him about Verner. Something Mike in Breaking Bad would have probably already gotten rid of. He'd be able to handle this quicker. This is a guy Mike actually likes enough that he's still protecting him. Gus is fine with it, but I'm sure if another strike happens with Verner, Gus won't be nearly as accepting and will want Mike to take care of it immediately. This is strong story building and conflicts and adding a nice twist to this storyline that I was worried about. I'm having faith again in this plot. I love how it complicates Gus and Mike's relationship and challenges Mike's soft side and conscience and sets up his transformation real well to being bad. It was a great choice having focus and worry on Verner, a guy Mike generally likes, and taking it away from his focus he was obsessed with on Kai. Bravo to the writers on this storyline. It's impressed me now. It's made a comeback. And bravo to Jonathan Banks and the actor Verner here as well. Really, really good in this episode. So overall, this is the first episode of the season. I will say that Nacho and Mike's storylines were my favorite and stole the episode, while the Kim and Jimmy story felt weak, formulaic, and out of this universe's identity, being such a bombastic operation that just didn't feel believable. And seriously, the reason to me it seems so unrealistic is how often does something like this complicated happen off the whim like that in the real world, if ever? And some of the character choices felt off in this episode, especially Kim's quick flip. But, like I said, Nacho and Mike's storylines are set up now with a strong vision of where it's going to go and for what's to come, and it should work well. But I just can't help but feel disappointed we haven't had our big episode yet this season, the big smash, which we've had in each season of Better Call Saul, the most recent one being last season with the courtroom episode. Especially knowing there's only 2 more episodes to go. And honestly, not a whole bunch has happened this season. Again, this episode felt more like an episode that would have been more effective episode 3 or 4 than an episode 8. Gotta pick up the pace here. Cannot forget you still gotta entertain. And that's where I think Breaking Bad, when it gets compared to Better Call Saul, will always have that advantage where it has the character building, it has the strong writing, great acting, but it's more entertaining. Better Call Saul has not hit that mark yet for me. So this episode, 8.3. It's the lowest one I've ranked this season. Disappointing. But I'm sure these last 2 episodes will have a lot of payoff, so we will see. Please let me know what you thought down below. I think there'll be a lot of arguments about this episode in particular. It's kind of polarizing. Please subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews. My review of each episode gets posted right after the episode airs, so you don't want to miss one. And please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.